Hi, John Feldt here. This is the Weekly Water Outlook National Edition, August 4th, 2013. Well, these are some of the key current trends as far as precipitation across the nation. I want to point out a couple interesting ones here. These are rainfall amounts for July. Look at this, 8.8 inches in Birmingham, 8.48 in Atlanta, almost 15 inches here in Tallahassee. So definitely a very wet pattern over the southeast U.S. in July. On the other hand, over the Midwest, what we have here is a developing pocket of dry soil moisture, very much below normal precipitation, 4 inches below normal in Des Moines, Iowa for July. We have the core of drought here over parts of the Great Plains, southern Great Plains that continues, although we've had some pockets of heavier rain here in July, including parts of Texas, 2 to 5 inches of rain, parts of Oklahoma and Arkansas, 3 to 6 inches of rain in that area. And then we have the persistent drought, long-lasting drought over the western part of the U.S. So these are some of the anomalies of precipitation and some of the key trends that we've had over the last month of July. Now I wanted to talk about soil moisture anomalies as well. These are seasonal soil moisture anomalies. These are not 1 week or 1 month. These go from May to the current time. And I wanted to point out the two prevailing soil moisture anomalies, and these are seasonal ones. These are the longer term ones. What we see is over the southeast U.S., a wet anomaly here. Parts of the Ohio as well has been quite wet, the eastern portions of the Corn Belt. And then this one I mentioned, centered over Iowa, extends into northern Missouri, now over eastern, towards the east into Illinois, northern Illinois, and actually now a little bit further up to the north as well. So we currently have, as we get into the latter parts of summer, a dry soil moisture anomaly and a wet soil moisture anomaly. And I think those are really the two key anomalies that we have developed in the summer of 2013. Now, in my newsletter, I talk about, did a little mini study here about drought. I wanted to point out, I sort of thought that wherever drought started in the early part of summer, it only increased as we went through the summer. And what I really find is there's a lot of variability. The top image here, this top graph, shows that of the years I looked at, and it was a short study, it didn't go real far back, but it really showed that even though most of the time it did either not change a lot or increased, it actually decreased a number of years. So typically there's some variability whether drought expands. It doesn't always expand as we go across a summer period. On the other hand, the intensity, the intense droughts, the strongest droughts, the most intense droughts, there's even more variability. Matter of fact, more times than not, it shrinks slightly. But there's pretty much equal chances for a little change or decrease, and that's that bottom image there. So take a look at my newsletter. I have an article on that as far as changes in drought over the summertime. So let's look at climatology from July on the left to August on the right. Generally, precipitation tames down a bit in August from July. It gets quieter. August, September, October, we start to go into a downswing as far as precipitation over most areas. An exception might be the southeast U.S. coastal regions along the coast. We still see interaction with sea breeze activity. It's maybe a signal with tropical activity moving inland. We see across the higher elevations of the Appalachians some enhanced precipitation. But generally, the trend in August and September is a quieter spell than we've seen earlier in the summer, and precipitation over most areas is somewhat less in August than it was in July. So current steering winds, well, look at this. Once again, I think it's been 3 or 4 weeks in a row I've been showing this pattern. Ridge of high pressure in the west, area low pressure in the east, and that has really been dominating the weather. Now, there have been some exceptions to this, but generally speaking, under this high, we're looking at above normal temperatures and drier than normal conditions. Under this low, cooler than normal temperatures and showery type precipitation. And there are a lot of exceptions to that, but those are the general type patterns. Now let's talk about the tropics real quickly. Tropics are quiet. You might have noticed in my blog that I mentioned this week that we had some dust that has blown off Africa, the African continent, into the tropical Atlantic. And when you get this much dust, it really inhibits activity. And you can look in this development region here in the Atlantic, and it's extremely quiet. Now that doesn't necessarily mean anything for later in the season. It can pick up very quickly, but right now, as we go from the early part of August into the middle part of August, really looks like it's going to be pretty quiet as far as tropical activity, both in the Atlantic and also in the Gulf. So from a water resource perspective, I really don't see much chance of bringing that tropical moisture inland. And even offshore here, where there is some activity, not much probability of increasing, and I don't see any signs of that being pulled inland as well. So quiet as far as tropics go. So the last 7 days precipitation, there's really been only one area where we've seen consistent heavy rain, and that's been on the southern edge of that jet from Kansas into southern Missouri. That area of red is 5 inches, even a little pocket here. If you look closely, you can see this little pocket right in here, purple. That's estimates of 10 inches of rain. So the heaviest rain is in this axis right here, and everywhere else is pretty scattered. We actually have had fairly wide areas of very quiet, low precipitation. These areas in blue are no precipitation. Very, very much quiet, and I think as we get into August we're going to see more of that, and that's typical as things begin to quiet down. So we look at percent of normal precipitation. You can see that that area in Kansas that I mentioned into Missouri, that was anywhere from 3 to 6 times normal for the week. Elsewhere, pretty widespread, that dark red, and that's 25% of normal. Actually, it's 5% or less than normal in that real dark red colors. So how much rain would it take to get things back to sort of a perfect world? This was before some of that heavy rain in Kansas last week, but otherwise, over the dry west, it ranges anywhere from 3 inches to as much as a foot of rain over parts of the west. Over the eastern U.S., pretty much we're close to where we need to be, and conditions are pretty good as far as precipitation goes. Now, a summary of stream flow. This is a 7-day, a weekly average over the nation. Corresponds very closely to the precipitation. You can see green are normal stream flows, blue and black are enhanced or higher stream flows, and then red would be below normal stream flow, and that's again associated where precipitation has been lighter. So a jet stream analysis, very little change this week. I put that dashed red line on there saying that that's the track of most of the energy. So there could be some energy that's triggering some precipitation, but it's going to be sort of modest. I don't see any real strong pockets of energy. So I think the best chance for precipitation will be on the southern edge of that boundary on the jet stream. And I wanted to talk about that just for a minute. This is temperature anomalies over the last number of days. Blue is where it's cooler than normal. Orange is where it's warmer than normal. And that aligns with that jet stream dipping down into the southeast U.S. Cooler air, warmer air. Remember I talked about that. And right in that boundary is where the most likely chance of precipitation will be, because that is going to be causing some of the forcings, and there'll be a front that'll be stalled in that area. So having said that, this is the 7-day forecast for precipitation. You can see that the most likely axis of heavier rain will be right along that boundary. Further north, it looks like there could be some modest precipitation where it's really needed. But one of the things I've noticed over the last 2 weeks are models are really having a hard time with this precipitation in particular, both in where it's going to be and how much. And then in this area here, this axis has been shifting, sometimes a little bit further north, sometimes a little bit further south. So as you might expect as we get in the middle part of summer, it's a little even harder to predict placement and quantity of precipitation. Now there is a very high confidence though of this dry pattern continuing over Texas, very dry, very tight gradient from heavy rain in this area to no rain in this area. And then the west looks like it's going to remain no rain at all over the week. As far as the southeast U.S., it looks like it's going to still have a chance of rain, but it looks like generally a little bit more scattered, a little bit more modest than we've seen over the last couple of weeks. Looks like a quieter week, even though there will be some precipitation in that region. Now let's take a look a little bit further out at glimpse. This is week 2, August 12th through 20th. Very little change. Here's that axis I was talking about, right along the southern edge of the jet stream. Dry, continued over Texas, dry over the west. Matter of fact, this looks very similar to week 1. Modest precipitation over the southeast U.S., and this is really a question mark here. It's hinting at perhaps some precipitation, but it looks pretty light to me, and it doesn't have a good track record. So, we'll see on that area. And weeks 3 and 4, look at this. Very, very little change. Wet southeast U.S., perhaps a chance over scattered parts of the Midwest, dry over Texas, dry over the West. So We're really in this persistent pattern. The takeaway points, the action will be mainly along just on the southern edge of the jet stream. Little change in these existing trends. Tropics will be quiet, and this is an extremely persistent pattern. Now, up this week, newsletter coming out very soon. Thursday will be my long-range outlook, looking through the rest of August, September, and October, and then sector updates throughout the week. Nice talking to you once again, and I will be updating my briefing again next weekend.